we do need. There are two things there. We need to do a better job. Well, first of all, it's about trust, and I'd like to think we're beginning to get there. Secondly, we need to do a better job of putting that out as one of the things we can help with. I mean, we've talked about titles, we've talked about surveys, we've talked about all those things. So this is obviously another one. But again, I guess, and this is the other thing too, and I'll just say this and I mean, I'd like to think that all the churches are connected to what we're trying to do with the Shaw Center. So I'd hope that through the churches they'd be aware of that too. So, New Hope or Abel or some of those groups would be aware of issues that might be forthcoming. But anyway.
Yes. So I'll give you an example. My grandfather on my mother's side lived in Red Hill and passed a few years ago, and then his wife passed away, and my mother was given half of the ownership of the property, but because he and his wife didn't have any children together, my step grandmother's portion of the property went to all of her brother and sister's children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. So there are like 30 other people that my mom has to notify, and it's a pretty lengthy and expensive process for her to be able to go through. And this kind of thing is happening in a lot of these neighborhoods, and that's why many of the properties are vacant, but nobody will come out and say that. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to be a part of this committee, to be that voice.
Right. I mean, it is. I mean, I was in several homes in the last week, and I know in at least 2 of them or 3 of them, the ownership is multiple siblings, just like what you just said. And really only the occupant lives in the home. Is only one. He's the only sibling in the area. The others are hither, thither, and yon. And in New York, Atlanta, you name it. So that's a big problem. And in your mother's case, she's really only has right to 50% of the house, because it's through her dad. But the stepmom's other half of the house is through all that crowd on the other side. So that's a real mess. I mean, I get that. I mean, the only salvation right now would be if your mom could afford to. She pays it current, and then she works it out before, so it doesn't get in trouble. She pays it current and then works it out later, essentially.
I'm sorry. The other part of that problem is that there is another home that's on part of that property. So it is really, really complicated, but it was all family owned. So
why don't you get with me after this call, and let me see if I can't get some help. Okay, we can figure out some stuff there. I don't mind helping you with that.
That would be wonderful, and I know my mom would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you want to step out of it and just hook me up with your mom, we can do that too. Okay.
Okay. Great. Thank you,
John, this is Tom, and I was wondering, I don't know if it's still prevalent, but even 15 to 20 years ago, one of the issues with the multiple heirs, and has been mentioned, sometimes it's, a lot of times it's really expensive to go through all this. So somebody would come in and try to buy one of the heirs out and then petition the court for a petition sale. And that's how a lot of these properties, the laws were written a long time ago for this kind of thing. And I don't know if I had been told that Clemson has something, I think you mentioned the state, and I think the state's done something too. Has there been things done that I don't know of? Because I can recall that being an issue, and I had heard about it happening in Seneca off Martin Creek one time, and it's something that would need to be corrected, but maybe it has been.
Well, I mean, I do know that you can go the route of a quitclaim deed, and maybe that's what you're talking about. where, but in this case, it sounds to me like there's multiple people out there that are aware. Normally a quitclaim deed is where they're not aware. Maybe you have one person involved, but they're not aware, and then that's how they get there. But yeah, I know of a property owner that has been dead since 1931. Nobody lives on the property, and the taxes are paid out of New Jersey. The good news is the taxes are paid. But I mean,
right.
That's
yeah. Well, what I had seen happen is that they got a quitclaim deed from one of the heirs, and then petitioned the court to go ahead and sell it,
right.
so that it was almost a forced sale.
Right.
That's just something that needs to be looked at, is if that's still. I have not heard of it happening, but if these neighborhoods are kind of under siege, so to speak, from people coming in, that could be a possibility. Again, I don't want to scare anybody. I saw it happen.
No,
that's a good point, Tom. And you kind of asked the question that I was wanting to ask was, in those cases where there can be 20 or gosh, even 5 or 6 people on a deed, I've heard of the stories. I don't have like written evidence that that one person was able to follow up and get the house sold. And now,
well, that's essentially what he just described. Is one of the heirs with the quitclaim deed and sell it that way, right?
Okay. Today's agenda is really mostly Elaine's going to take this over because she has been working. We met John, Elaine, and I met with Shannon Quattlebaum. For those of you who don't know Shannon, she has been hired as the project manager. And her task is to corral us, essentially, which is good and bad. And so as we have lunch, and then afterward, I'm going to turn this over to Elaine because she brought up some good points. And we're going to try to do a simple Jeopardy exercise today and see how far we can make it. But I'm going to turn it over to Elaine. It's all yours.
Hey, Catherine, let's get everybody to mute because somebody's got some background noise, kind of annoying. So if everybody mutes except Elaine, hopefully it'll go away.
Somebody was drumming.
Okay, so before we start, I do want to mention in relation to this heir properties, I think we can look closer at this organization near Charleston called the Center for Heirs Property Preservation. And they only help the people in the Charleston, Somerville, somewhere, and I don't know what the boundaries of it are, but it's not statewide. It's specifically for that. But it's legal help for multiple heirs like that. And we're not going to get to that point here. However, part of the charge of the Shaw Center for us has been that we do want to help with that. And we're working on maybe finding a handful of attorneys in the area who are willing to serve pro bono for individual cases. And we might not need an attorney but once a month or something like that. But we just need a list of the ones who might be willing to help us. And I think that could kind of address what Felicia's concerns are, but it goes bigger so that we do it and make sure we have everybody in this area understand that we've got help for them in some way. We just have to have them connect to the right person. I like the idea of having this heirsproperty.org site because then it becomes not so much, there's a purpose for them to get help and a place that's only for that kind of help. So we just need to do better with that here as well. But I'm glad Felissa shared that that situation with us because that we will continue to work on that. And that's what I was talking about, Felissa, that I wanted to share with the Shaw Center board on Thursday night. So what I've been sitting at my laptop at the dining room table all day. And most of it has been related to this committee. I've got about 4 things on my plate I'm trying to close down right now, and I didn't get any of them done today. But so I kind of waffled around a little bit with what we would talk about today. But Shannon had pulled out the, if you've got the document that I sent you, it was attached just a little while ago. I think it was a little after 2 or sometime. It was this afternoon. But she pulled out the things related to our charge that are in the white paper. And so what I thought we would do today, first I went through and put all kind of questions that we might ask about it. And then I got reined back in a little bit. And And I think we start with the big picture and decide, is this something we support, we don't support? Do we need to change the focus? Do we need to amend it? Do we need to add things that aren't there? So that's kind of where we'll go. So what I thought is we might just start with the support the creation of affordable housing recommendations, this first one, and kind of go from there with what we have. And if we have time, I have a little bit of information about overlays, nothing specific for here, but just some I found in other places that we might want to talk about. But if we don't have time today, we'll get them the next time. And I think the recommendation is going to be for us to meet weekly for a while, because we started that way and then we switched to every other week. But if we've got these specific things to work on, I think we can start to move forward with them if we meet weekly. If we need to change the time or the day to suit people better, we can certainly do that too. So we'll work on figuring out what might be the best. But we've got a good group here tonight, so let's start talking about these. So remember that do we support it or do we not? Do we support it if it's worded differently? What's missing from the list? And then our next steps will go a little bit deeper and finalize a list of recommendations. And then we can get into the process of the process and how we're going to do that. So let's start with the support the creation of affordable housing recommendations. And there are three things. Incorporate affordable and workforce housing into catalyst areas using planned development agreements and public funding where needed. And we do need to be working with the land use and development work group. So is that something you think we need to strongly support? We don't need to do that, or do we need to change the focus of it? So I'm going to mute and let's have some other conversation from everybody else.
I am probably the worst person to do this because I'm such a wordsmither. To me, incorporate means that there will be. And I am hesitant to say that will be is something that we can support everywhere. And then I will also wordsmith the jeepers out of it, that then where needed is also a little fuzzy. So I think that maybe we want to wordsmith it just a tad to talk about how we can incorporate affordable and workforce housing into catalyst areas using the public-private partnership funding, and then just maybe leave out the where needed or something. I understand what they're trying to get to. I just worry that we're going to be boxed in a little too much. But y'all can disagree because I know I'm a dork about this.
Or do we identify where they are needed instead of just leaving it generally where needed? So
I think it would be a good idea to identify where it's needed. And then is there any way that we can put deadlines on this? Because it's like, okay, well, this is going into the future. However, at what point will this start, happening with the continued plan developments?
That's a good point. I don't know if that covers like in 2 and 3. I agree with you. Or is this assumed? Elaine, do you think it's assumed that this is over like the next 5 years as part of Next?
I don't know, but we can say, we can just decide ourselves what's an immediate, what's a short term, what's a long term. And maybe that's one of the things we use when we finally hone in on what we want them to be, that then we decide whether it's something that needs to be addressed immediately or short-term or long-term. What do you think about that?
Maybe that's a good point. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I think so, because there are some things that are going to be immediate needs, especially when concerning these traditionally African-American neighborhoods, because if we wait too long, it's going to be too late.
Tiffany, do you have something you want to add?
Bill?
If I'm remembering the white paper correctly, there are some of the catalyst areas where they have put in the notion of workforce or affordable housing. They've got little maps that suggest that. So for instance, the areas where they want to put student housing, those notions don't appear. So probably ought to look at those to see what they're up to. I really dislike the term catalyst area, but I will put that aside. Chad kind of mentioned this just a moment ago in a note. The planned development agreements, whatever happens, I think that we need to have rather stipulative guidelines established before we even go into this about what it is that's going to come out, because that is so open-ended that it worries me.
Did y'all see the document?
Having said that is one of the two things on this list that I am most in favor of. It's just how in the world to do it.
And Mary, our city attorney, took a look at the draft for the plan, that ordinance to have planned developments for any residential development in the commercial districts. And there's some question about whether that fits with what the affordable, what was it called? The CARE Act. What's it called, Catherine? What's that?
The American Rescue Plan or the American Rescue Plan?
No, I'm talking the Enabling Act. The Enabling Act at the state that established, that one, that act. Whether we'll be able to do that or not. So I don't know how that's all going to work out, but I think we have to be careful about that because we don't want to recommend something that's not going to be possible at all. But I agree with Bill. This should be one of our priorities.
To Bill's point, like where would this recommendation be? Wouldn't it be in the comprehensive plan, or are you talking about Bill putting it in as a code of? Is there something more forceful than?
I think Elaine's bringing up the problem that it might be hard to get it in the code. It'd be nice to be able to get it in the code. This is partly watching the BAR recommend projects that they shouldn't be recommending in my mind. And it's I don't know how you get things like vision and character and code and protecting other neighborhoods into the code, but the BAR hasn't been doing that. And whatever plan development process happens, it seems to me that you've got to have that kind of protection in there. So you both get what you want, and the people around that live near what you're getting when you're getting what you want are in a way, but it's not so much that they shouldn't be harmed by it, that their lives should be improved by it. It seems to me. I don't know how you get that. And Mary may be right that it's very hard to get that into South Carolina law.
So that doesn't mean we still can't determine how to incorporate affordable and workforce housing. It just says that we might not be able to do it through PDs where the city has a little more opportunity to guide the development of something. So that's going to be interesting to see.
So you're saying that Mary is now saying that the proposal where we use any of the commercial districts where we take out the residential housing component and only allow it to come back as a PD, she's saying that's we're not going to be able to do that?
She hasn't exactly said that, but that was one of her concerns about whether that would end up in essentially being viewed as a taking.
We need another opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. The other thing I thought about is, and I'd like this answered, and I don't know that anybody on our call can do it, but from a legal standpoint, do we have to have a residential component of our commercial districts?
I wouldn't think so, but I will find out for you.
But see, if that's the zoning and we say no residential district, no residential component to our commercial districts, that
it seems to me that we set that standard for ourselves. And so I think that truthfully, I'm not being whatever. We need another opinion on that because we keep throwing around taking all the time. And I don't see how this is a taking. I just think it makes the process a little different with a PD. I don't see how you call that a taking. But anyway.
I think the only thing, I mean, as I understand it, I mean, I should, maybe obviously isn't the right word, but anyway, I would think that you would have to grandfather certain people in who already lived in those communities. You don't think, John?
No, I just think that, I mean, it's commercial to begin with. They purchased it knowing that. The only thing that I guess is different is the fact that, you know, this is just a different process to put the residential in there. I mean, you know, if you go back to Kiowee Trail, they brought it forward as a PD, and we never turned it down. I guess they just didn't like the vibe. And I mean, you know, the truth of the matter is, Dockside was at one time considered doing it as a PD. Actually, our planning and codes people said that the PD presentation was actually better than the as zone presentation. I'm sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
I didn't mean the new developments. What I meant was that if we change that overlay district, then people who happen to live in a commercial area, we can't make them move, is what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the new development.
No, right.
I'm talking about as is. You can't just tell people that they can't live in above.
No,
whatever.
No,
there's
right.
Some of that residential up there.
Right. Now, the other thing, though, to Bill's point about the BAR, I agree, Bill. We've either got to revamp that. We got to set a new standard. I don't know what we've got to do. But, you know, you talk about a classic BAR failure. We had the situation there with the garage on Riggs, backing up to Riggs. And, you know, we talked about buffers in the future. And where's the buffer on Dockside and Holiday? There is no buffer.
And let me just say that Rick Ware has lost all buffer that he had.
I mean, well, he's lost his mind. But the point of it is that, I mean, really, you start and think about it, there is no buffer. I mean, right. Literally, and we talked about that. I thought we had a lesson learned with the I guess it'd be the Finley, or whatever that building is there with that parking garage up against Riggs Drive, and we turned right around and did it again. Anyway, we digress. Let's move on.
So if we take this, Elaine, I'm going to try to edit while we go a little bit.
Okay.
The question is incorporate affordable and workforce housing into catalyst areas. And we want to take, do I understand we want to take out this planned development agreement and public funding? I mean, I can undo it. I'm fine with it as.
Well, I don't know that we need to, I think we're more concerned about the where needed. How do you define where needed?
Okay, well then let's just take that out.
Or we need to be more specific about it if we're going to have something in there to restrict it to certain areas.
Okay.
What other thoughts about this affordable and workforce housing?
What do you mean?
Well,
Tom?
Yeah, you know, in terms of a public-private, I think it has to be that way. And I think I'm on the land use committee, and I think the areas that are being looked at that were suggested by the consultants, we're looking at those and trying to incorporate areas where you can have workforce and affordable, lower income. You know, affordable is tough to define, and unless there's some type of zoning or ability for the city to get involved and subsidize, or if there's a planned development, you require the developer to set aside property and give it to the foundation bank, the land bank, or whatever. And I think that's what we're trying to do is make sure those areas aren't just one use, and putting it near transportation, because I think you can't really have affordable housing without transportation. A lot of the folks that are looking for that also need, you know, to ride the bus or get downtown or do whatever they have to do. So I think that's going to be important to try to subsidize these areas, either from the developers themselves or the city, or bringing in a developer that does this with tax credits, that type of thing.
So Tom,
it's going to be a good thing.
Tom, so what you're saying is it's almost like with wetlands. In other words, if you're going to take wetlands, you have to put wetlands back. Is it the same kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think some areas, you know, it's kind of like, and we were talking about I was in the in those meetings trying to draft that ordinance that basically said you can't put residential anymore in a commercial zone using the conditional use, because it's just a conditional use anyway, but doesn't really have to go anywhere. There's no committees or anything else. So now, in Dockside, one of the reasons the Dockside PD was getting better was because that developer did not want to revert back to the zoning, which was CP2. Made it a lot more expensive. But if he hadn't been able to use CP2 in the first place, the Dockside project probably either wouldn't have happened or it would look a lot different. So the developers have kind of the way they've gotten around density is to go to the planned development, and there's no restriction, nor in a commercial development. So that's all being addressed. I'm not sure if it's taking, but I bring all that up to say that the developer is wanting to get as much density as possible. We all know that. And so in some cases in a PD, you might trade a little density for them to give a certain amount of funding for lower income housing or workforce housing. And I think that's been done in other places. It's basically a tax, but generally it will be paid. A good example of another tax is the city requires the developers in these commercial zones to put commercial on the bottom floor, but they never end up filling them because they don't really want to. So they end up building basically an elevated crawl space, and it never gets filled. And something that we're trying to remedy as well, to get the rents down for mom and pops and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a subsidy, it's a tax, it's whatever you want to call it, but I think that's a way to fund a lot of these things, especially, one of the areas is where the old Bilo, old Winn-Dixie, that area, that would be a great area for all the things we're talking about. They back up to Cadillac Heights, one side does. So if you did have affordable or lower income housing, it's right next to that neighborhood. And hopefully near a lot of shopping options, because I think the retail is going to change tremendously in that area. It has to, with the vacant big boxes there.
Tom, when Kathy and I talked with you several years ago, you talked about that there used to be a maximum density for PDs, and you thought, I think I understood you correctly, that it was a good idea to have that. Do you recall what that density was?
I think it's 56
okay.
Beds an acre in a PD, I believe. And I think it may still be that. I'm not sure. But I know in commercial, in the C district or the CM district, there's no limit. You're limited basically by the other things in the ordinance, which is, the height. Architectural, there's a lot of things you can do and mandate architecturally and height wise, which essentially will drive the density down anyway. And I think that's what CM has done. If you look at the old Mellow Mushroom building, the old Pica Shack there across from the tennis courts, that was a full acre zone CM. CM, you can only go up 40 feet. You can get another 10 feet. And I know you folks on the Planning Commission know all this, but you can get another 10 feet with more buffer. But the project they built in there where Amici is, I think they were only able to max out 60 beds on an acre, and they had to do structured parking behind it, and then they had to do commercial. That's essentially one of those projects that no one wants to do because they don't work. I can tell you that. And from an architectural standpoint, I don't think it was, it doesn't really fit, and it's kind of a one-off. But there's ways to reduce density. But I think in the land use, we're definitely looking at doing that. But I think the first shot was no residential commercial area. And then that would allow developers to come in and still do mixed use, but it has to conform to whatever architectural controls get beefed up. Mm-hmm. And you do want to encourage non-student mixed use. There's a market demand for, condominiums or brownstones or condos over retail that people buy to be downtown, and they're not students. So you don't want to eliminate that. Mainly it's purpose-built student housing. That's what everyone's trying to get away from, at least from the scale and the location.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we need to finish at least one of these in an hour.
Yeah, really.
I know that's what happens when you get thoughtful people together. I'm aware, but can we agree that we support this number one statement?
Yes, I think that's been the consensus. Am I correct?
I agree.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Bill, Dad, Tiffany.
All right.
We're good.
Ready for the second one? Okay.
Establish a housing trust fund to support affordable development and accelerate the Community Housing Foundation's work.
Okay, I think we have at least started on that, and John may want to speak to this with establishing the Shaw Center, because
I wonder if that's the Shaw Center and or the Community Housing Foundation.
So I don't know, because I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what that is.
I mean, why can't it be one and the same?
Yeah.
That's what I want to make sure of. So the Shaw.
Because part of the work of the Shaw Center is going to be, it may not be developing affordable housing, at least at this point, and it may not ever be, depends on where we are, but financially, we're still a couple of weeks away from having our final 501c3 approval. So we're kind of limited. I'm working on 2 grants, one for the Greater Clemson community and one for the All In Foundation. If we get fully funded from both of those, and we may not, that would only be $15,000. And John can tell you what he's seeing in the houses that need assistance. $15,000 is not going to go very far.
So what if we changed it? Okay, establish a housing trust fund to support affordable housing and their neighborhoods.
I would just take development out, because this particular foundation, well, and I don't even think if you had a community foundation, either one would actually be doing development. That's right. Going to have to become something that works through, I guess, in a way, number one, where to what we were talking about, where you pick up additional monies through the planned development agreements, et cetera, those types of things. But I think there's really 2 parts to it. But my view is the Community Housing Foundation is more about what we do with our existing inventory of affordable housing.
Okay, and Chad says, who was on that steering committee, said that he thought that was probably what the type of thing that the Shaw Center is what the ClemsonNext consultants were referring to when they crafted that wording. So I think we're probably on the right track with that then.
Okay. Wow, that was good. Yay! Okay.
Yeah, remember at this point, we're not saying how we're going to get it done. We're just focusing on the things that we think are important and need to be either tweaked, like we're tweaking. And I appreciate, Catherine, you doing it with the comments to the side, because that's going to help the rest of the implementation committee see where our thoughts were when we were doing that too.
Well, and again, this is big picture, and then we'll get into, I think for those of you who haven't talked to Shannon, we didn't quite realize, but her goal, I think, is she's going to take all of the different task forces bullet points, for lack of a better word, and then create that alignment among them. So let's, number 3, see if we can get number 3 in 20 minutes. Continue to explore opportunities to allow and promote smaller lot housing in single family neighborhoods through the zoning code.
Okay, I want to back up 1 second. Yeah. Chad put a question there, and I think it's a good question to raise. Is Housing Trust Fund different from the Shaw Center?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to. Somebody was talking in one meeting the other day about the housing, the development center. Is that what it was, Chad? They were talking about something, the fund. You're right. There was some other discussion, and I was I was not someplace where I could ask a question.
I've got piano going on in the background, so if y'all can hear me, I hope you can hear me, but I just didn't know if that was, I don't know what that means. So I guess if we're making a recommendation, maybe I'm the only one, but I just wanted to make sure.
Well, I tell you what, the joy of this is we can make a comment.
Maybe put in the notes, Catherine, we need to better define what housing trust fund means.
Can I make a stab at what I think it means?
Yeah.
And I think the development is probably the key word. I think what they want is a fund that will help further the development, so that when you are doing the planning development, you can have some kind of exchange with people, and you say, well, if you put money into this particular fund, you can have these many more units in what you're going to build. I think that's maybe what they're after. And I think the Shaw Center, as I'm understanding it, is more about preservation and enhancement of already existing areas. And so one of the, if I'm wrong about this, I may be, but it seems to me the Housing Foundation is to get money to get new affordable housing, and Shaw is to protect and enhance areas that already exist. I may be wrong.
No, I think you're right, but I guess I was thinking that number one, in a way, maybe address that, because in my view is that if a developer doesn't want to integrate workforce and or affordable housing in his project, instead of, having him give money, we give him density. My view is he gives us money. I think we need to quit playing with density, because density has gotten us in an awful big jam right now. And so my view is like in the Charleston model, where he either puts it in there or he basically pays you X number of dollars per square foot to not put it in there. And I think that's my view of how that should operate. And then that money, I think there are two parts to that. Then that money could actually be used, because I think if I was right, I play with the numbers on this. If we'd have charged the dockside $5.13 a foot, I think it would have cost them as much as $1 million. Well, we could do a lot with $1 million in this Shaw Center, but also in other development, because I don't think that community housing fund is actually going to be in what I call full-blown development, where we take the buy-load building or that area over there, tear it down, and put in, higher density affordable housing. I think that's something that's beyond our capability, honestly. But I do think that a portion of the monies that the dockside would have given us, to use it hypothetically, a portion of the monies would go into that fund to help us continue to work on our existing affordable housing inventory. And the majority of the money would go towards the development of new affordable housing. But guys, I'm going to go back to, and I'm going to say it time and time again, is I don't believe that the families that live in our existing historic Black neighborhoods and their affordable housing, that they can or would be interested in moving into, or can they afford to move into a different affordable housing, model. I know that the last two I was in Sunday a week ago, what monies they have in, and those homes are paid for free and clear, and they're in terrible shape. But the money that they have is all they can do is afford to pay their utility bills, their insurance, and taxes, and eat. And that's all they can do. So if we came along and said, hey, we're going to let you move into this place for $300 a month or whatever it is, they couldn't do it. They don't have it.
So I think what our first steps with this, the first steps, and I'm thinking baby steps, would be what John's talking about, where we go in and help these residents bring their houses up to standards. And like the guy that doesn't have a working shower or bathtub, an 85-year-old that doesn't have a working bathtub or shower right now, that needs to be fixed. So I think there are going to be enough of those. It'll take us a while to get a lot of those back up to speed. But as we move forward with that, and as the resources for the Shaw Center increase and we get donations, and if it's used as a bargaining tool with our, that's maybe not the right word, but if it's used so that some money comes in from a development as well, that's going to allow the Shaw Center to expand and do more of the other things as well. That's kind of the way I see it.
No, I think you're right. The thing I'm thinking of, and this was where I remembered where it was in our budget discussion for council for next year, is that we are talking about using some of the American Rescue Plan money to replenish some fund that I'm forgetting the official name of, but it's like the Community Development Housing Fund or something like that. And I will find out the name for that, but and I will let you guys know what it is and what we're replenishing it from or to. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. And John's right about the Shaw Center's work. Okay, any other comments on number 2?
I mean, I guess I'm still not clear what the Housing Trust Fund is, but that's fine. I mean, I felt like people speculated, but do we know for sure? And if you know, that's fine.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm going to find out tonight what we were talking about, and see what the differences are. They might have just called it the Housing Trust Fund, and now it's officially the Shaw Center.
Okay, because community anyway. And then the other half, I just was going to reiterate or kind of what was said in terms of for the folks that are living in those areas that can't afford to move anywhere else, the property and the house that was there is already in their family's ownership, free and clear. I would like to see effort go into helping them bring that property value up, make that a livable space so they can live in their houses on their property and not be displaced. And I think that kind of goes back to the earlier point of along with helping people understand, inheritance and wills and how to make sure that doesn't just get taken away because no one's clear about the legalities of it.
Tiffany, that's what the Shaw Center is about, bringing those houses up to a livable condition. Yeah,
I mean, so and I thought I could unmute on my headset earlier. Just in general, I guess the question, is there like a prioritization in terms of in neighborhoods in terms of which ones need, we're going to go here first, to this neighborhood first, are they prioritized anyway, or is it just a matter of?
Well, this is what's happened. We've got a needs survey out there. We've probably put out well over 100. We've gotten 35 back. Of the 35 we've gotten back, 7 have raised their hand and said that they need some help. And of those 7, they're spread around several. Three were in Cadillac Heights, 2 were in Red Hill, 2 were in Abel. Let's see, 2, 4. That's it. I think that's 7. So yes. No. Actually, one of them was across the street from Golden View Church. So my numbers are off a little bit, but it's 7. And so, there is no priority. I mean, obviously it's the priority, quite honestly, is driven by the money. If we've got X amount of money and I can fix 2 or 3 of those, which I guess I would consider low hanging fruit, then I'd go ahead and do that. But there's several of those that are fairly significant. And until we get more money, I think of the 7 right now, between 50 and 60, it would take between $50,000 and $60,000 to get them up to speed. And so I think you can figure between $5,000 and $10,000 a home, based on what I have seen so far.
I just looked up what I'm Googling, the definition for housing trust funds. And I think this makes sense to me, and it still makes sense that the Shaw Center is part of this. Housing trust funds are distinct funds established by city, county, or state governments that receive ongoing dedicated sources of public funding to support the preservation and production of affordable housing. The preservation says you do what we're doing with the Shaw Center right now. You're bringing those houses up to a livable standard. And then the other part is increase opportunities for families and individuals to access decent, affordable homes. So I can see how the Shaw Center would fit into that and be involved with it. What do you think, John?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I go back to, we get into developing a large scale event. I don't think we currently don't have the people or the bandwidth to do that. That's where Tom or somebody like that would have to come in.
Yeah, I think that went right over his head.
Hopefully not.
Okay.
Nope.
We got 10 minutes for the last one, guys. Okay. and continue to explore opportunities to allow and promote smaller lot housing in single-family neighborhoods through the zoning code. I would sort of switch that around and talk about continue to explore opportunities to use the zoning code to promote housing, to promote something about new kinds of single-family neighborhoods, or to continue to promote single-family neighborhoods.
I would agree with that.
I think the only thing that I want to caution you about is the intent here is for affordable housing. And so if you're not careful, you're going to open this up for something that is some unintended consequence. So you've got to be careful how you word this. Because, I mean, let's just say you say allow and promote small lot housing in single family neighborhoods. That's a pretty broad statement. And by going down that path, your land costs would clearly, in some neighborhoods, well, in most neighborhoods, could very well get in the way of anything efforts you're trying to make when it comes to affordable housing. So somehow you got to, I don't know, you got to
balance those two.
You got to wordsmith that a little differently. And I'm not, maybe that's where Bill comes in and it helps us a little bit. But I mean, I get what you're trying to do, but I'm
worried about the promote. I know what you're saying, and the affordable housing. That's the balance in my head. Is these phrases, allow and promote.
I'll give you a good example. There's acreage in Cadillac Heights right now. I guarantee you, if you went in there and did something like that, it would still unless you were careful, it still set yourself up for an unintended consequence. So I don't really know. This one needs some work.
Yeah, I think we want to be careful not to promote just straight infill within the R12, R20 neighborhoods, the residential neighborhoods. And that again, like John says, it's not going to, the end result is it's not going to end up with affordable housing by any stretch. So I think we want to be careful that we don't set up something like he's talking about that would end up changing the single family homes, but maybe some overlays in places about that. And maybe it's restricted to adjacent to R12, R20. You could have smaller lot, single family homes so that you don't just go in the middle and plot a whole bunch of individual homes. And anyhow, that's all I'll say.
Well, I think if you go back to this on affordable housing, again, somebody, like Tom, I can chime in on this, but I still think an affordable house is anything under $100,000. Well, if you amortize $100,000 roughly, let's just say they had $5,000. If you amortize that, you're looking at over $600 a month, $660 a month. And that to me is really almost outside of, what I guess would be affordable housing. It's on the top. If it's affordable at all, it's on the upper end. So thus, your land cost, you're going to have to get your land cost down to near nothing. And I mean, I don't know where this piece of property is, but I mean, you'd have to almost have T9C lots where, and again, we're assuming that everybody has to have a house with a yard, and maybe they don't. I personally think they would like that, but I mean, maybe they don't, maybe they can't. So that's what scares me about this number 3. I can't think of any property in Clemson right now. Nothing comes to mind that even no matter where it is, it's valuable because there's only 7.5 square miles in Clemson, and there's really not a lot of land that's not development. So it almost is going to have to be a redevelopment opportunity to get there. Tom, I see you want to speak. Go.
Yeah, no, I'd say I agree. There's no, I think they say the ship sailed. I mean, the only real affordable housing that's being built right now, and you can define affordable any way you want, is all the things being built at the seams, at the edges of Clemson, Pendleton, and Central. In order to get, to me, workforce, affordable, obviously low income, it's going to have to be subsidized, which means the city has to buy the lot. and it's probably going to be multifamily. It's not going to be individual. The prices of homes, existing, new, in Clemson are just they're kind of parallel to what's happening nationally. But Clemson has always been expensive because there's really no other way, no place to grow. You have to tear things down to build things. So I would agree with that.
Okay, I apologize, but I want to stop this discussion and let Elaine talk for a few minutes on these overlay districts, because I feel like we've been tossing around this word, and this is a new word for my vocabulary. Sesame Street did not teach about overlay districts, and so if Elaine, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for 7 minutes, with one exception, which is you have all of these. What we would like to do is we'll set our next meeting, and hopefully with some opportunities for you guys to do this ahead of time, do your homework, is we can get through the rest of these and get them back to Shannon.
Right.
Dr. Richardson?
Okay, so I was looking for how overlay districts were used to preserve existing neighborhoods, minority neighborhoods, whatever. And so I ran across this one big deal that was going on in Philadelphia, and it kind of helped me understand a little bit. So I made some notes here. I'm just going to share what I've written. And the title of it is "The Rise of the Overlay, How an Obscure Zoning Tool is Shaping Philly's Future." So they're using, overlays have been around a long time, but they're using it for a new purpose. The special overlay district that aims to slow gentrification by restricting the height and density of new construction. Well, given where the neighborhoods that are of concern to us, the minority neighborhoods, most of them are RM2, and that's already, and some are RM1, and Vista Circles actually are 12. And I think there might be some RM3s somewhere as part of it, but those are all the RM1 and 2, and the R districts are all capped at 35 feet, and there are some density requirements on them. So I'm not sure how much that would help us, but I just found it interesting how they were using it. The new construction that was happening, they felt clashed with the historic fabric of the community, like adding roof decks, and they banned adding those, and certain facade wrappers like vinyl and stucco and horizontal. Those were all not fitting in the character of what they already had. The goal was to preserve the sense of neighborhood that residents know, establish preservation standards like those often used in wealthier, often whiter areas, and give residents more control over change in their community. And we just haven't done that with our historically Black. And this is interesting too. They in 2020, Philadelphia created 6 new overlay districts. I need to go into their code and see what all of those apply to, but this was just this one article I was reading. And some of them covered a whole neighborhood. Some of them covered one block. So they were using it for shaping a lot of different types of things. Some curbed development, others encouraged it, which is kind of what we're talking about with our catalyst areas being encouraging development there. So I guess that would be a form of overlay district that we would use for those.
I have one question, Elaine, which is that now that doesn't change the zoning under the overlay, right?
Right.
Okay.
As I understand it now, that if I start to think too hard about that, I get myself in a rabbit hole.
I know.
And where's the other one? Then I found this other one that's from the National Trust for Historic Preservation that was actually prepared for the city of Detroit in 2018. But at the back of it, they have the results of neighborhood conservation district surveys. And I just need to send this document to you guys so you can take a look at it. But for example, in Atlanta, they have conservation districts that are intended to help conserve historic, architectural, and cultural significance of neighborhoods. And then they have some links for it. And then not working well because of the advisory nature of review. Local historic preservation law already allows for tailoring and individual neighborhood guidelines and review in a way similar to, I don't know what NCS is. Neighborhood Conservation District and Neighborhood Conservation I don't know what the S is, but it says that NCDs, the districts may be duplicative for what they already have. But anyhow, why don't I send this to you? And this is like a 35-page document, but it has some good information from other places that completed a survey related to that too. And we can see how it's working in other places as well. I still don't have a good handle on what we would put, what kind of requirements we would put in the overlay district for our minority neighborhoods. I just don't have a good enough grasp of it.
Well, and that's the challenge. So I think that's a question, as we all keep saying, in the next little bit, because, you know, I agree with you. It's an easy thing to get bogged down in. Mm-hmm. But the goal, I think, if you read the 54-page document, and I know I need to revisit it now that we're having these discussions, if you need a copy of anything, let us know. We're going to try to, Elaine and I are trying to work to make sure we have access to our Google Drive that the city's given us. And that way, I think everybody will have access to that, right, Elaine? We can designate that?
Yes, yes. And Bill raised a question in the chat box about, do we do overlays or do we change the zoning? Or do we, yeah, and we can either change the existing zoning or we can potentially create a new zoning category. And that was one of the, where were we talking about that with the RM1 and the RM1A, you know, the discussion we had back when that one piece of property came up and asked for changing the zoning to RM1. And the concern was what else is allowed in RM1? Is it how we would want an existing RM12 piece of property to be used? There are lots of places in our comp plan that discourage rezoning any of the R districts, but this one that was proposed may come forth as a PD now that if we get this other piece, that will include public space. Okay. Instead of commercial or institutional or whatever. If you're interested in looking at the PDs that Clemson has already, I think there are 19 or 20. If you go to Planning and Codes page, there's a link to all of the PDs that have been approved in Clemson. Okay. So that's not very helpful with the overlays. That's just what I found, how this one place was doing it. And I don't have the specifics for what these 6 different look like. And I can certainly go do some more research and see what I can find out with what's in their zoning about that. And then I'll send the Neighborhood and Conservation District document that I've got. That's fairly current.
Awesome. Okay, campers, it is 5:01. I don't want to keep you on. Everybody's got stuff to do. So we'll follow up with notes here. We've got, and don't forget that the